Please welcome Jordan Culpepper, Social Media Manager and Multicultural Beauty with L'Oreal. Thomas Bickley, Quantitative Reasoning and Social Reform with Designed by Us. Henry Gordon, 2020 graduate of Emory University, and Jessica Bennett, Editor-at-Large with the New York Times.
Hi, everyone. How are you?
Hi there. Hello.
Thank you all for being here. So to everyone who's tuning in, Gen Z, they're the future. We read about how they're the future all the time. I have covered Gen Z and the ways that they are reshaping our workplaces and our cultures. But a lot of my work has focused on Gen Z young women. And so it's actually quite a delight for me to be here today with three young men who are members of Generation Z and who also happen to have mothers that you might have heard of. So you got a brief intro, but I'll give another one. Jordan Culpepper works at L'Oreal, as you heard. He's heading into grad school for law and diplomacy at Tufts, and he is also the son of Pamela Culpepper, a longtime top diversity leader at Pepsi and one of the founding partners at Have Her Back. Jordan wave. Thomas Binkley is studying criminal justice at the University of Illinois. He's going into his senior year and is the son of Joanna Pena Binkley, who heads research and design for Alexa. Thomas, thanks for being with us. And Henry Gordon, whose last name may sound familiar. He is the son of 3% founder Kat Gordon and just graduated from Emory University. So I want to chat a little bit about your upbringing, since we've heard about your moms, and your moms are all very powerful and working in areas of inclusion and diversity. To what extent were gender roles something that was discussed in your households when you were growing up? And how did that shape who you are as adults? Jordan, let's start with you, and I'll call on each of you to make it easier.
Absolutely. I think that as a kid growing up, there were no such thing as gender roles. I knew that mom went to work, I knew that dad went to work, and they made money enough for me as a kid to eat and have the toys and the clothes that I needed. But I also think that, it was very well known throughout the house that in order to, get what you want in terms of, money or accolades, you really did have to work for it. And I think that was something that was taught equally from both parents at a very, very young age. And I don't think I saw anything related to gender roles until I got older, not necessarily in my house, but as I started to look at school, I started to look at jobs and seeing what the traditional role of the man was supposed to be, not only in the house, but in the workforce. And it's something that I tried not to subscribe to because, going to college, I would see, young women who were getting technical degrees, who wanted to go get those six-figure jobs, go into government. And it was very normalized for me. And that was something that I extremely valued going, into my career when I first started.
It's interesting. I just followed you on Instagram like 30 seconds before this began and saw that you actually have a project on Instagram devoted to elevating the voices of young Black men. So I wasn't planning on asking you this, but can you tell us a bit about that?
Absolutely. So the project is called the Crystal Stair Project, and it was something that I wanted to do to elevate the stories of young Black men, because I know in society we're perceived a certain way, and a lot of people weren't really sure about what it's like to be a young Black man growing up in this country. And so I interviewed over 100 Black men from 22 states and 8 countries just to get their stories on success, hardship, and resilience. And it's something that has definitely changed me, but also given me a lot of perspective on what masculinity is, not only defined as in the United States, but around the world. And so it's something that I'm definitely continuing. It's been super, super rewarding.
Thomas, let's jump to you. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing and you today.
Oh, I grew up in a household where my mother was the breadwinner. I mean, for the first half of my life, my father was a stay-at-home dad. And when people would ask me about my parents, I would tell them, my mom works and my dad stays home and helps raise my sisters and I. And I always got the same response. People would say, oh, so your mom is your dad and your dad is your mom. you know, and I'd kind of laugh a little bit, but also look at them and say, no, my dad is my dad and my mom is my mom. So, you know, my dad has always been supportive of my mom's work, and there's never been a sense of jealousy or anything like that. My dad made the decision with my mother to raise my sisters and I at home so that my mom could pursue opportunities in her career without having to worry about the day-to-day details of, you know, who's going to take Thomas to baseball or who's going to take, you know, my sisters to acting or to band practice. So the way I always saw it was, you know, my dad ran the family so that my mom could help run the world.
Amazing. Henry?
It's funny. I actually, when Jordan started speaking, I felt the exact same way, where both my parents were working since I was really, really young. And my mom, in the later half of her career, later part of her career, has taken on a really entrepreneurial spirit of how to approach work. And it's really incredible having both parents that work and being able to pick and choose who you can grab lessons from at different times in completely different industries. But for me, it's always been so funny confronting the stereotype of seeing my mom up on the big stage in New York and having my dad being the one bringing out the flowers, you know what I mean? Having the rest of the boys support the big project that she's spearheading. So definitely different in that way, but very similar to how Jordan approaches.
So we're all living in a time right now when a lot of persistent and existing inequalities have really been brought to the surface in a dramatic way, from COVID's disproportionate effect on Black and Brown communities to the protests for Black lives and what we're seeing around police brutality. You are all either at the end of your college careers or starting your next journeys. How do you see the role of activism, advocacy, allyship, like whatever you want to call it, in your current or future professional lives? We'll go in the same order to keep it simple.
I think that brands are now going to have to be very politically focused. And I think a lot of, especially working in beauty, we wanted to just focus on, you know, how you look, how you feel. But now we have to get this activist role. So, you know, through my channels for Dark and Lovely, we talked about hair care and hair color and all things beauty, but we also told you where you could vote. We also told you what the difference between a primary and a general election are. We also told you about where you could donate, you know, during the protests, where in New York specifically you could do a peaceful protest. And, you know, we got a lot of good feedback from that, because I think people and our consumers are really looking to be both empowered from a beauty standpoint, but empowered in a social standpoint as well. And I think consumers are really focused on, you know, who's very active in the community, as well as, you know, actively gaining profit. We want you to be as socially conscious as, you know, the rest of the world.
That's interesting. So you're working at a huge beauty brand. I don't know that it's one that people particularly think of as progressive. Do you think it's the role and responsibility of organizations, no matter what industry they're in, to also engage on these issues now? It's interesting because you're running social media for them, right? So I imagine you're doing a lot of the thinking around this.
Yeah. I think historically it wasn't the job of companies to have to do this, because we've never been faced with an issue that's affecting us like this, right? And I think, you know, for L'Oreal, it was really apparent that there were some internal changes that we needed to make, or some conversations that needed to be had, that, you know, put our issues to the forefront and made sure that these brands also had a moral bone to their body. As much as they wanted to promote beauty, it was also about, you know, how are you supporting your LGBTQ community? How are you supporting Black women? How are you emboldening Black men of color to feel like they're beautiful? And really kind of fighting that rigidity of what we thought beautiful was before, at least in our context.
Thomas, what about for you personally? How has allyship or activism played a role in your life?
Well, I would say my mother's own activism and her philanthropy has always inspired me to bring about change. I've gotten to see my mom advise the President of the United States, CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, and creative students. She's done so with integrity and ingenuity and the level of what I call badassery, that's inspiring, but also approachable. She's the same person at the White House as she is in the boardroom and as she is at the dinner table, because, she wakes us up with the same enthusiasm she has when she starts her speeches. And she has taught me that if you have questions about the systems of this world and you don't like the answers you get, you go out and you create your own solutions. And that's always stuck with me, especially in my college work, where I've been writing theses on police reform and criminal justice reform. And it's stuck with me also in my position at Design by Us, where I'm a part of studio programs that are focused on female economic empowerment and the importance of lifelong learning through solving big problems with inventive solutions. My mother taught me about privilege, and if you have the privilege in your life, you use it to help others. You speak up even when it's uncomfortable, and you do what is right over what is best for you, because in the end, we're not going to be judged by a title, and we're not going to be judged by what job we have. We're going to be judged on how we make people feel and what we did to help the most vulnerable among us.
What did your thesis about police brutality say?
I'm sorry?
What did your thesis about police brutality say?
I actually did my thesis on redirecting resources, redirecting, overspending on police departments and redirecting them into mental health and domestic violence and, other aspects of violence that need funding.
Really interesting. So you were doing this before the current protests?
I actually submitted my thesis a month before the protest.
Wow. Relevant. Henry, how about you?
It's funny, earlier when you were talking about future corporate direction and the trends we're moving towards, and advocacy scholarship, we're now in a place. I was speaking with my mom recently about how we, as through social media now, in really an evolved stage of social media, we as consumers have tremendous leverage over the brands that we hold accountable. And in the same way, we think about traditional capitalism and being able to supply a good in the best way, the brands that are going to be able to provide the best, not just full embodiment of diversity, who are the most involved in their communities and the most giving back, are the ones that are going to succeed the best. Kind of a new phase, I guess, of corporate philanthropy. And I guess it's funny, Thomas, you're talking about the reallocation of funds, and as we move away from public spending, now there's all this incredible call to be defunding the police, defunding the military. These new funds are going to have to be reinvested elsewhere, and I'm excited for a future where we, the consumers, have the power to demand where private and public funds are going to be placed and for whom.
Do you think that you just graduated, right? So you're thinking about what's next for you. Do you think that'll play a role in what you do next?
Oh, yeah. So it's really tricky for me, just being a mere little graduate, being able to identify exactly which brands are doing it the best way. And I'm personally really deeply invested in fine art, social design, and the design industry. So I'm trying to think about how can these industries, you think about Virgil Abloh's recent $1 million scholarship, which is for disenfranchised Black men, as he put it in his own words. That's fantastic. $1 million is a lot of money, but it's really time for massive coalitions of entire industries and larger corporations within specific industries to rise up and pool resources together. And those are the type of firms that I am really looking forward to working with. Firms that are active all of the time and unrelenting.
Can you all tell us about a time when either you challenge somebody else's views in a workplace or I guess a college context, or your views were challenged?
So I can take that first. We were doing a Black History Month campaign for one of our hair brands when I worked on the professional side. And it was me and almost 10 other white women who were behind making these media rollouts. And I sometimes wish I was able to take a picture of that room, because sometimes I didn't think people understood, sometimes who were making those decisions and making the media that was supposed to be representative of Black women and Black men. There was a time when we were in the meeting and, I had to scrap the entire plan that they were thinking about because it had already been done. We were going to be seen kind of as a second place to other firms that had done this rollout, and really helping them understand what the community wanted to see in terms of imagery, in terms of music, in terms of setting, from the products that we were using to the stylists that we chose, making sure that we were, supporting our entrepreneurial and freelance stylists. And they were really receptive of it, but I can only imagine what would have happened had I not been in the room, right? And I worked across several different brands, and I was really focused on helping this textured hair brand grow. But that instance of me being the sole person in that room is not a unique story across the country and across marketing departments across the country and big firms. And so I think it's really imperative that we continue to speak out and don't be afraid to be vocal, because, that one idea that you have could be the thing that changes the entire campaign and the response that you get.
Were they receptive to that, and did they realize why that was a problem?
They were receptive. I don't know if they realized why it was a problem. I think they definitely valued the input, but I think even before I joined that team, that was business as usual. We're just going to create these marketing campaigns in how we view it should be, because we've been here for years and they were older than me. But it still could come off as tone deaf. And that was further exacerbated when we had the protests, and as we continue to fight police brutality. If you're tone deaf, you have to speak up. And I think there's an onus on us right now to really make sure that we can get brands into shape and saying that this is not going to work. This is how this community is going to respond. And it could definitely impact your bottom line.
Thomas and Henry, when's a time when you either spoke up or maybe you wished that you had spoken up?
Thomas, you can go ahead first.
Sorry?
You can go ahead first, Thomas.
Okay. I think for me, something that I've had to challenge views is actually going back to when I presented my thesis on police reform. And, I was talking about reallocation of resources. There are certain students who said, what you're doing is, you're taking valuable assets away from, the police department that need it. And I think I had to, I was definitely prepared for that sort of reaction. And I had to lay out the ideas. I think where I had to do it is that I had to lay out an idea, because this person obviously had a different set of ideals than I did. And I didn't want to come at them in a disrespectful way, because, it's important to respect other people's views, but you want to give people perspective. And I think that's what I did. I said, hey, this is exactly why I think we should do this. And, you don't have to agree with me at first, but I think you should consider it. And I think it was, and it ended up in a very good and a very positive and a very constructive conversation.
Henry, we have to wrap shortly, but quickly tell us your answer.
Quickly then. Instead of, I guess, thinking about allyship and myself and when I'm speaking out, there isn't necessarily a single moment that jumps out to me. But one of the biggest things, I guess, trailing along in my mother's journey and really through an exciting decade of empowerment is my own personal view on how to be an ally has really shifted from, when I was younger, you gotta speak up, you gotta be an individual. And now I'm really in a place with myself where I know I'm the best ally listening to others. and being the least intelligent person in the room, and making sure I step back and question, not making statements. I guess recognizing my own privilege to a certain extent, and listening to targeted initiatives from people who really know what they're talking about, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I like that. So listening. Gentlemen, you are going to shape future workplaces. I really wish you all the best in your next endeavors, and thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it. Take care.